There's a popular method that many think proves that God does not exist. It disproves the existence of God. This method involves logical reasoning to prove that God is that of a square circle. But is this really the case? Is God really logically impossible and therefore non-existent in any possible world? Well, let's take a look at the arguments posed. God is all-powerful or omnipotent. He can do anything. Now, this is a trait many think is logically flawed, because of course then comes the age-old question, can God create a rock so heavy that he can't move it? It seems like any answer to this question just shows that omnipotence really doesn't make much sense. But that's not the only problem that they claim. God is also described as all-good, or omnibenevolent, incapable of doing evil. But then there comes the problem. If God's all-powerful, he can do evil. But if he's all-good, he can't. How can these coexist in the same person? Now this is where many say God cannot exist because he's logically impossible. He's a square circle. Well, this is only true if God's power allows him to contradict his own nature. There are 4 points that I want you to remember throughout the duration of this video that'll help assess the argument. Anything is possible for God. Nothing is impossible for God. God can do anything, but God can't do nothing. It might sound a little bit strange, but we'll come back to that momentarily. With those 4 points in mind, let's look at the first question. Can God create a rock too heavy for him to move? The answer is no, because a rock too heavy for an infinite being to move is logically incoherent. Remember the points I made. Everything is possible for God. Nothing is impossible for God. Now, listen closely. Everything is possible for God. No thing is impossible for God. Now, God is eternally existent. And because of that, he's incapable of doing nothing. It's impossible for him. Like I said earlier, a rock too heavy for an all-powerful being to move is logically incoherent. That makes it impossible. It's not a thing. It's a nothing. God cannot create a rock too heavy for him to move because such cannot exist. Everything is possible for God, but no thing is impossible for God. God can do anything, but he can't do nothing. Well, how about the second problem? Can God perform evil? Well, no. Like the first question, it's also a logically incoherent question. For a maximally great, eternal being to actively go against his own nature is a logical contradiction, which is not realistically reconcilable, and is not a thing. Again, it's a nothing. So, God cannot do evil because it is logically impossible for him to contradict himself. This is not a limitation to God's omnipotence, because God can do everything, but he can't do no thing. So a logical contradiction like creating a married bachelor or a square circle is impossible because it cannot exist and is a nothing. God cannot do a nothing. It's not a border that God cannot cross because there would be nothing on the other side. So in reality, God is only a square circle if he can do logically incoherent things. A God that is omnipotent and can do everything cannot do something that is logically impossible because it is not a thing. So God cannot create a rock too heavy for him to move, and he cannot do evil because they're both logically impossible. God cannot create something that can't exist or do something that can't happen. Again, God can do everything, but these aren't things. They're impossible. They're not things. So what we realize here is that God's omnipotence and omnibenevolence is still intact and logically sound. Food for thought. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, maybe you want to check out some of my other videos. Maybe they'll catch your interest. Maybe they won't. Who knows? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. A rock too powerful. There's some powerful rocks out there.